Okay, let me show off the actual workshop. Partly because the maze isn't any different in hard mode, and partly because the hard mode workshop is actually really fun. It's a nice bump up in difficulty without anything being an obnoxious brick wall like in previous areas. In fact, there's only one thing, really, that I don't like about the workshop, and it's really more a problem that I have with hard mode in general than the workshop specifically. What's the gorge like? No idea. If this area at the bottom is any indication, there's probably lots of spikes that make the conveyor belts trickier to use. Really thought I wasn't going to get through both of those. Sometimes you just can't do anything to make something more difficult without it being obviously annoying to the player. There could have been rockets here, but the average player is going to be taxed enough with having to quickly move through the crushers before they can catch up. Yes, meeting the entourage, moving on. It's hard for me to say whether this section would be easier or not coming from the other direction. Aside from this first chaser drone, you can lead chaser drones into the paths of rockets almost immediately coming up from the bottom, whereas going down they would most likely still be alive and pose a threat. At the same time, all you really have to do is just fall down coming the other way. Part of why I love the workshop, really. Plenty of ways to tackle problems, and hard mode makes it necessary to be even more creative too. This was recorded before I found out about the dispenser with free armor in the upper section of the workshop, so I'm incredibly protective of my extra hits. Having said that, I think I actually did quite well avoiding most hits throughout this whole area, considering most of these situations are ones that require quick thinking in spaces where your movement is incredibly limited and also that I'm not very good. Haha, blocked off forever. And it looks like that one spring really is a death trap now, dropping you right onto spikes. This whole area got a lot more deadly in fact, so I'm going to spend as little time in it as possible. A side benefit of not needing to get every single battery. Now, getting up to the top half of the workshop in normal mode took a little bit of work, nothing major, just some basic platforming. This, however, is another thing altogether. It gets even more interesting in just a second. Moving rocket launchers. It took long enough, honestly. Just imagine if there were some attached to conveyor belts. That'd be fun. This part feels like the successful implementation of what that one room in the hard mode factory was trying to do, honestly. Okay, so here's my one problem with the workshop. Less a problem with the area itself and more a problem with hard mode. I may have actually cut past it, but one of these vacuum bots was in the first screen of the sitting room in hard mode. It posed basically no challenge there and warranted no mention. But remember how in the attic there was a SAM launcher that needed to be taken out with a chandelier? Going even further back, remember how there were moths in the castle caves? These are 3 instances of hard mode dropping an enemy from much later in the game into the early game. At the time, I'd thought the moths and the rocket launcher were incredibly hard and really devious additions to the levels, because they were. But they don't appear after those single instances until the places they normally appear in normal mode, and then they don't appear ever again. Because I skipped over the workshop my first time though, I didn't realize this until a little later, but the point still stands that hard mode started off with a lot of really cool ideas, centered around assuming that the player has played through the entire game on normal mode, which they have to do to unlock hard mode, and taking that as permission to take elements from anywhere in the game and put them anywhere else in the game to create something ridiculously challenging. What seems to have happened is that a few elements turned out to fit better than others in a couple of situations, and so the ones that didn't fit as well were considered less and less for future rooms that needed to be altered, until they were just ignored altogether. But just think of how crazy the maze would have been with moths, or Rooftop City with a large rocket launcher. I'm not saying that they should have thrown more things in for the sake of it. There's something to be said for people who can recognize when not to add something to a level's design after all. I just think that there's so much more that could have been done with these mid-game levels if the factory video hadn't already made that evident. This room is probably my favourite of the workshop. On top of how tricky it was to move around with the chaser drones, now there's rockets, which might not seem too deadly when they don't home in on Kurt, but it's very easy to accidentally use the beam to push one of them into you. After the factory, it's barely a requirement to use the slingshot again, but it's really useful here to get beams where you want them without having to sacrifice a safe zone. You cannot tell me that wasn't funny. This part I love especially. It's a fantastic combination of quick, precise throws of the beam, careful movement around the camera view cones, and controlling the order in which you place the beams. They're few and far between, but moments like these are my favourite of hard mode, especially because when you do it all correctly, it looks impressive as hell. an exuberant amount of time moving the boxes to the plates to pick up the constellation, and we're on our way out. The way out seems like it'd be a real bitch to go through without all the doors open, I must say. The lasers on conveyor belts is a cool idea, but they just end up destroying each other like so many other instances of lots of hazards in cramped areas. And I don't think they appear anywhere else in the game either, so hope you enjoyed those 5 seconds of that cool, interesting idea. Oh, come on, you're right there. Just get to the exit. And that's what the workshop really looks like. It actually went faster than normal mode at 27 minutes, mostly because I didn't get every single battery, but still, it's a great area that's made harder, yet still fun to play.